Welcome everyone. I hope you've all been enjoying the amazing content of Digital Hammurabi's YouTube Ancient History Day so far. My name's Carlos Jordan, and I'm a disabled postgraduate student at University College London's Institute of Archaeology, reading the archaeology and heritage of Egypt and the Middle East. My interests broadly encompass the areas of religion, magic and identity in the Egyptian world, with a specific focus on the representations of and approaches to disability in ancient Egypt. Before I begin, I'd like to say thanks to both Megan and Josh over at Digital Hammurabi for both organising this event and for giving me a chance to be a part of it with my topic for you today. What they've achieved through this collaboration is nothing short of amazing and serves as a great vehicle for advancing the interests of and engagement with ancient world studies. Thank you both. When thinking of a topic for the event, I wanted to choose something that would help to illustrate just how multifaceted and complex our studies can be. Often we're not just attempting to answer questions of what happened when, where and why, but a lot of the time our questions for the past are shaped by our present moment. When we choose to investigate something like disability in antiquity, the questions we're often asking are shaped around the questions we're asking ourselves today. How accepted was disability in the ancient world? Was it recognized as its own distinct identity? Did ancient societies accommodate this difference or not? These questions are undoubtedly important, but as a disabled scholar, one thing that I find is often missing in these discourses around ancient attitudes towards disability is not just the voice of the ancients themselves, but disabled voices too. Far too often the interpretation stops at the water's edge of the true depth of disability as a lived experience. Partly, truth be told, because the scholars who've been writing about it are overwhelmingly non-disabled, and so cannot testify to that experience. When it comes to interpreting the evidence we have for impairments and reconstructing what it may have been like to move and live through these different times and spaces with them, the conclusions often tend to either be over-medicalized, or if it is attempting to look at the social realities of disability, cannot escape this idea of disability as a system of oppression, a la the social model of disability, which was formulated in the 1980s to highlight the ways in which societies construct barriers that oppress and exclude disabled people. This has led to broad, sweeping conclusions by some scholars that, due to the absence of any determinative evidence for these things, disability, as a construct, could not have existed in antiquity. Here's the major problem I have with this conclusion. The social model was devised to respond to our present moment, to the realities of navigating the world with an impairment in a post-industrial, neoliberal society. It was never, ever designed to encapsulate the entirety of disability as an embodiment, or to suggest that should those barriers be removed or simply not be present, that disability would cease to exist or cease to be relevant. Furthermore, looking into the past and trying to find definitive proof of thoughts from past peoples that fit to ours is needlessly loaded and fraught with potential misunderstanding. If you go into your investigations about disability in antiquity thinking that it must be along this fixed binary of acceptance or oppression, that is all you're allowing yourself to see, and as a result, seeing very little at all. My amazing disabled peer, Amelia, has made a great video for this YouTube Ancient History Day, looking at the challenges of defining disability in the ancient world, so do make sure to check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. With all of this in mind, I want to use this opportunity to share with you my thoughts as a disabled scholar on how I think we can perhaps begin to puzzle out the ancient Egyptians' feelings towards disability. In order to do that, we're going to look at Egyptian myths and literature, and through their writings, their own words, demonstrate how I believe they recognize disability not just as a distinct embodiment that was inherent to the natural cycle of life, but also as something which brought with it anxieties that were dangerous but could be navigated. Through this, I believe we'll be able to appreciate the complexity of their own feelings, but also tease out where ours may have supplanted theirs in previous readings. Due to the depth and breadth of the types of literary sources and subsequent analyses that are out there, this talk cannot hope to cover them all in the time that we have available here. I also would like you to think of this less like a lecture and more as just an opportunity to listen to a disabled person's perspective on this topic through just a few examples, and perhaps from there look at some of these sources and other sources from across the ancient world that may touch upon similar themes with a fresh pair of eyes. One of the most recurring themes in ancient Egyptian myth and literature is the idea of the universal cycle to which all living things, humans and gods alike, are bound, and that there will come a time when they must pass on into the next life to be reborn and live for eternity as one of the blessed dead. This is something we're all familiar with, I'm sure, but part of this process comes with navigating the transformations that the body goes through when it is preparing for this eventual transition into the life everlasting. in the instructions of Ptah-hotep, composed anywhere between the end of the Old Kingdom and the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, the elderly vizier Ptah-hotep is preparing to retire and so says to his king, "My sovereign lord, old age has arrived, infirmity has descended, misery has drawn nigh, and weakness increases. One must take a nap like a child every day. The eyes are blurred, the ears are deaf, and vigor wanes because of weariness. The mouth is silent and no longer speaks. The memory is gone and cannot recall even yesterday. The bones ache through frailty. Pleasure has become repulsive and all taste has vanished. What old age does to men is totally despicable. The nose becomes plugged and cannot breathe. Even standing and sitting are a bother. Permit your humble servant to appoint a staff of old age." These themes of disability occurring as a natural part of the process of life and the need for preparation also occur in stories such as the Tale of Sineway, where the titular fictional character, who was compelled by an inner force to flee Egypt to Palestine following the death of Amenemhet I, realizes that he is reaching old age and petitions the new king, Senusret I, to be allowed to return so that his body may be youthful again, before he passes on to the cities for eternity. This preparation is necessary to ensure a safe journey to the other world. Even Ra, the sun god, was not exempt from this process. In the Book of the Heavenly Cow, a myth that finds its roots in the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom, though doesn't become fully formulated until the New Kingdom, we are immediately introduced to a deity who had grown old, his bones being of silver, his flesh of gold, and his hair of genuine lapis lazuli, all precious but equally very malleable materials. Even though the story is about mankind's attempt to overthrow the aging king, and how he thwarts them by setting Hathor in the form of Sekhmet upon them, it's this near destruction of humankind that causes the sun god to withdraw from humanity, and so sets in motion the formulation of the universe as it would be known to humanity, and in so doing would require them to follow the sun god in this process. What does any of this mean for our focus on disability in ancient Egypt? For me, it's two things. One, the fact that old age has less to do with reaching a certain arbitrary age, but rather is a noted transformative state at which the body is notably weaker, and therefore, two, is a state in which intervention of a kind is required to ensure the smooth and orderly transition or continued action of responsibilities, and the best livelihood for the affected person. The staff of old age that Ptah-hotep referred to perhaps has a dual meaning, both in the sense that he is referring to his son who will succeed him, but also to a literal staff or walking stick that will aid him in his final acts, and in doing so, allow him to be youthful again, as is alluded to in Sineway, for that time before he journeys with Ra into the west. Walking sticks and staffs appear in numerous examples of Egyptian art and iconography, and we know that they could be utilized for multiple purposes, either as a mark of status or for literal assistance, from humble doorkeeper to boy kings themselves. Here we see just the heads of 2 of the hundreds of walking sticks that were buried in the tomb of Tutankhamun. I share these with you because I think they help to most vividly express how even what may appear to just be a simple walking aid can in fact hold a greater cultural significance and symbolism. These 2 walking sticks have handles shaped in the form of 2 enemies of Egypt, a Nubian and a Mesopotamian respectively, and so when Tutankhamun, whose mummified remains show signs of scoliosis and multiple other disabilities, used these sticks likely in his day-to-day activities as king, they not only enabled him to move but fulfill his role as vanquisher of Egypt's enemies by throttling them in his hands as he gripped on them. In this way, the Egyptians not only managed to accommodate for his mobility needs, but also address the need for him to still appear strong in his role as pharaoh, symbolism that would not have been lost on anyone at the time. If you would like to know more about Tutankhamun and his disabilities, I'll provide a link to a talk on the subject from my wonderful fellow disabled Egyptologist, Alexandra Morris, in the description below. Sticking with the theme of the malleability of the human and divine body during the transformative stages of life, one of the big questions that often preoccupies the mind of studies of disability in antiquity is what happens if a person loses a limb and, if and when they may acquire a prosthetic, how that may change not only their experiences of life and the eternal one, but also how their body is then perceived by both themselves and the people around them. Are these new limbs like-for-like replacements of those they lost, or are they something entirely new, and thus is the person renewed? I believe that there are perhaps some hints towards an answer in Egyptian mythology. The loss of limbs and or vital organs, and their replacement subsequently leading to the creation of something new, either from the replacement or from the lost limb or organ themselves, are central to the stories of creation and the life beyond. The pyramid texts feature several elements which would later go on to form wider stories. In one, an elderly Ra quarrels with his eye, and in the fallout loses said eye, which, now embodying her own sentience, flees to Palestine. When the eye returns thanks to the intervention of Tot, they return to find that Ra has replaced her with a new eye. The old eye cries in frustration, and it's from her tears that humanity is born. Ra, so stunned by this, places his old eye atop his head, transforming her into the solar disk. Now she can watch over her children. Ra is not the only god to lose an eye. Horus, during his conflict with his uncle Set for the throne of Egypt, is said to lose an eye, or both, during one such fierce battle. In some variations of the story, Tot restores the eye, and it becomes the Wedjet or Ujat eye, the eye that represents wholeness and the cosmos. In another, it is either Hathor or Isis that discovers an injured Horus, and using the milk of a gazelle, gives him new eyes while the destroyed eyes are planted in the earth, sprouting forth in some variations as either the lotus plant or as grapevines. In both of these stories, a transformation has happened. Even when an eye is restored, as in the case of Horus, it is not the same eye as it was before. It has become something new, something more powerful. Without doubt, one of the most notable and foundational of Egyptian myths to feature the dismemberment of the body and transformations is the Osiris myth, which is an overarching collection of tales transmitted across millennia of Egyptian history, telling the story of Seth's unlawful usurpation of Osiris's throne by his murder, escalating to the dismembering of his body and scattering the pieces across Egypt. Isis, undeterred by this and determined to give birth to Osiris's rightful heir, Horus, sets out on a journey to find each of the pieces. Upon finding them all, she reassembles the body with the help of her sister Nephesis, binding the body together in white linen, and with their magics combined they breathe new life into him. In this he transitions from Osiris, the king of Egypt, to Osiris, the god of the otherworld. Of course, this myth forms the foundation for the transformative process of mummification and Osiris's role in the universal life cycle, but the elements of dismemberment, the binding and reconstruction of the body might also add more weight to the idea of the body, once changed, is no longer the same as it was before, and furthermore that the altering of the body by magic, either in the sense of powerful spells, as in myths, or in the case of real life, healing via medicinal remedy, is noteworthy in how it may continually affect a person's embodiment. After all, Osiris requires the continuing magics of both Isis and Nephesis to maintain his new form. One final story of limb loss that often gets overlooked but I feel deserves to be highlighted in order to drive this point home is of the ferryman, Nempti. This falcon-headed god becomes a collateral victim of the contendings of Horus and Set, when during the seemingly unending court deliberation by the Ennead as to who should be the rightful king of Egypt, the court moves to the secluded island in the middle, so that they can continue their judgment away from Isis, who Seth fears will try to influence the outcome with her magic. He specifically instructs Nempti not to ferry anyone who looks like Isis across. Isis, once again undeterred, disguises herself as an old woman and approaches him to be brought across. When he initially declines the offer of food as payment, she instead offers him a golden ring. Enamored with the ring, Nempti eagerly agrees and takes her across. Her deception quickly revealed thereafter, Seth demands punishment on Nempti, and so he has all of his toes removed. This is doubly damning when you consider that since he embodies a falcon, this means he will no longer be able to perch on anything, including his own fairy. However, the reason I highlight this story is more so for the fact that following this traumatic event, Nempti now has an aversion to gold. He swears to never go near it or have it in his cult city again. Why is this significant? I believe it's significant for the fact that it's not only Nempti's body that has changed. Even if his toes were restored to him, his mind would still be traumatized, and I think it's that recognition of trauma which once again demonstrates that the Egyptians could see how a person would be changed, regardless of whether the body was restored or not. I stress this point in part because I believe our histories of the body in ancient Egypt assume too much normativity where there isn't any in Egyptian thought, and that the Egyptian reaction to bodily difference and ergo disability was not to try and rationalize ways in which it could be made to conform to a norm, but instead attempt to make sense of why these differences occurred and what part that played in the larger cycle of the universe. I believe we see this clearly through the role of the Egyptian god Khnum, the potter god, whose role is to mould the body as it is born into being. It was believed that he, in concordance with gods like Taweret and Bes, who protected the child and their mother from malign spirits, along with the 7 Hathors, the 7 manifestations of the goddess that foretold an individual's life and eventual death, were responsible for shaping a person's lifetime, and so the condition of their body could be seen as part of that design. This is further underlined by the instructions of Amenemhotep, a New Kingdom text in which the titular scribe is leaving a set of instructions for his son on how to lead a normal and pious life. In chapter 25 he writes, "Do not laugh at a blind man, nor taunt a dwarf, neither interfere with the condition of a cripple. Do not taunt a man who is in the hand of God, nor scowl at him if he errs. Man is clay and straw, and God is his potter. He overthrows and he builds daily. He impoverishes 1,000 if he wishes, but he makes 1,000 into officials. When he is in his hour of life, how fortunate is he who reaches the west when he is safe in the hand of God." In this, I believe, we find not only an affirmation of the idea that life, and therefore, by extension, the body in general, is malleable and ever-changing right up until the end. It is only in the hand of God, which may refer directly to Khnum, the 7 Hathor, or an amalgamation of the two and others, that your fate is in any way certain, and that even then you must focus on making it to the end first. The idea that man is described as clay and straw suggests to me that Amenemhotep wishes to get across to his son that change was not only plausible but to be expected, and so there are no guarantees except in the way which you choose to conduct yourself, which is what the wider text revolves around. Another way I believe we can explore the Egyptians' relationship with bodily difference, and perhaps see how our own assumptions have supplanted their ideas in transmission, is to look at their relationship with one of our clearest examples within the record, that being dwarfism. The famous autobiography of Harkuf, a nomarch, essentially a governor or overseer, of Upper Egypt during the end of the Old Kingdom, recounts to us the correspondence he shared with the royal residents during some of his expeditions further south. In one such letter we learn that he is planning to bring back a person of short stature with him to the residence, so that he may perform the dances of the god to distract and thrill the heart of the young Pepi II. This has sometimes been conflated with humour, and that said dancer is being brought, in some cases the assumption being taken, to simply entertain the boy king. I don't believe this is the case, however, and I feel a closer reading of the text, in broader consideration of the evidence we have for dwarfism in Egypt, may demonstrate that in fact the matter is being taken entirely seriously, and that the person of short stature whom Harkuf is bringing back with him is an active participant in this exchange. A near contemporary man with dwarfism, Khnumhotep, also lived during the 6th dynasty at the end of the Old Kingdom. The inscription upon his statue from Saqqara, which is regrettably the only trace we have left of him, tells us that he too was a dancer, and that he in fact danced in the funeral of 2 sacred bulls, which were often used to signify kingship in the absence of the king at major festivities within the temples. He was not only a dancer either, he was an overseer of the Ka priests, which meant he managed the priests who were responsible for maintaining and giving daily offerings to the deceased in the necropolis. Even with this short biographical detail, we can see that his role was quite prominent and indeed quite serious. From the Middle Kingdom onwards, the god Bes, who embodies dwarfism and is believed to have originated from Nubia or Somalia, the same general region as Harkuf's newest courtier for the king, employs dancing in his effort to ward off evil during childbirth and within the household. During the time when Isis and the infant Horus were in hiding from Seth, Bes was said to keep guard over the infant, hence why his face often appears in reliefs alongside Horus the child. He too sometimes gets described as comical due to his appearance by modern scholars, but I believe to the Egyptians he was anything but. His forward-facing imagery, along with either always being armed or in an aggressive pose, shows that he is ready to leap into action and attack. He too is quite serious. So then I believe the role of the person with short stature who Harkuf intends to bring to the king's residence is serious too, and while distract and thrill may be taken to mean to entertain, that in no way automatically implies that it is purely for humour, and in fact I would suppose that it is to keep his heart, the place where his mind rests and develops, free from ill thoughts or evil forces. hence perhaps the reason for all the due care that he receives on his journey. I explore this idea of disabled people in ancient Egypt employing their own agency in a talk I gave last month for the Allard Pearson Museum. You can find a link to that in the description below if you want a more focused talk on that. To wrap up, I hope that just these few examples of readings from ancient Egyptian myth and literature have given you an appreciation for how they may help us to begin to piece together how the Egyptians perceived and felt about disability as an embodiment and yet another transformative, transitionary state of life. As I said near the beginning, this was never going to be ever to cover all of the sources. If you, for example, are curious about what sources we may find towards things like mental health in ancient Egypt, I'd recommend giving The Dispute Between a Man and His Bar a read. If nothing else, I hope what you take away from this talk is that if you are interested in looking into the ancient past for answers to our own questions today, you should never forget to see them on their own terms or lull yourself into thinking that their answers, or their world itself, will be in any way less complex and multifaceted than our own. Often I think their answers might surprise you, and that is ancient history, and why I love to study it. Anyway, I've rambled on at you all for long enough. I should hand off back to Megan and Josh for the midway point of the show. Thanks for listening, folks. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments below, and enjoy the rest of your day.